It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and I'm sure that you are very happy to be sitting here whilst the sun is shining outside and you are here inside. But you'll have a chance during the breaks to enjoy the sunshine. I thank Monica for the invitation, and Anna, my co-worker as well, Anna contacted me and said, talk about Swedish democracy. And I thought, I don't know much about Swedish democracy. I know quite a few Swedish politicians, but I don't know much about democracy in Sweden. But I said, well, okay, I will talk about my own thoughts of someone who can't vote, and that's me. I can't vote. I've been unable to vote for many, many years because I spent the last 20 years working in Europe, rapidly, I became eligible to vote in the UK, and now I'm in Sweden. I can't vote here either. So I couldn't vote in this famous referendum that there was, and more of that in a minute. So I cannot vote, but I can still think a little bit anyway. So these are some of my thoughts. So 9 years ago today, Jürgen Wixton here, who worked for the ESS. We were at that point 17 people. We'd built up from 2 or 3, but 9 years ago today, we had the decision on the location of the ESS here in Lund, and that was a real day for celebration. And this is what the ESS looks like now. So this is the linear accelerator, bringing the protons to the target. The target is here, and then all of the instruments and the researchers will come around here. And here we see Max 4, which is absolutely beautiful. And to see it today is the best day to see it when the sun is shining. It's absolutely beautiful. And both these facilities will be world-leading. They will not be world-class, world quality. They will be world-leading. They will be the best in the world. And we sometimes forget that. But why am I showing this? Well, because of this. Who's building it? Who's building the ESS? And these are the nationalities who are represented within the ESS. And there are 50 nationalities. So this is truly an international project. So now there are 455 people who are working for the ESS. There are at least another 600, 700, 800 who are working for other companies there as well. But the point about this is that 247 of these people cannot vote. Does it matter? Does it matter that I can't vote? Does it matter that they can't vote? Well, I think it does. And I've applied for Swedish citizenship. And it's been going on now for 18, 19 months. So one day there'll be a knock on my door. And they'll say, you, get out. No, they'll say, you are, I hope. That's what they would say in Britain. So my naive view of democracy, and you can think about whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong, but I think this is the topic of the day, is what are the dangers to democracy? So there should be a well-educated electorate. There needs to be a well-informed electorate. It's no good voting if you don't know what you're voting about, or if your politicians tell you the wrong things, as they did for the UK referendum. One vote, and they are the people who make the vote and the ones who should actually determine the policy. A fair distribution of representatives. You should feel that you are represented. A government that listens and adapts. We're so used to politicians being asked questions, and they do not answer the questions. And for me, this is destructive. A government, did I just say that? Ministers who do not dissemble or deceive. Dissemble is a nice word. It's as if you said to me, did you walk here today? And I would say, no, I didn't. And then in brackets inside my own head, I say, well, actually, I ran here. It's a way of answering a question without telling the truth. And our politicians today, and forgive me, those of you who are politicians in the room, Our politicians today have got this habit, and in fact, I think they're trained to do this, and this is again damaging. Politicians whom people trust, and I feel in Sweden that people do trust politicians, much more so than I trust the politicians in the UK, or that my daughter and son-in-law, who are now American citizens, trust the President of the United States of America. No corruption. Too much money floating around, too much money going through different offshore accounts, buying super yachts and football clubs and things like this. Surely we want no corruption if we have a democracy. Our government should not be overtly influenced by non-voters, and I think that this is everywhere nowadays. Once the voters vote, that's the end of it. Then it's those who influence. And action should speak louder than words, and not words speak louder than actions. President Trump has given $100 million. The truth is he didn't give anything. But he did say that he was giving it, and people believe it, and it's not true. An agenda that seeks the best for all, and not for one subset, one small subset of society. And that's basically my talk, to be honest. So, what does it mean to vote? What's the meaning of voting? You know, when we go and vote, what is it like? Is it like that? Do we follow each other? Are we the majority? The majority, it's you. Is it true? Is there a grain of truth in it? Sadly, I think there is. The information for the electorate. This is happening. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Is this being well informed, or is it frightening the people? In the UK, there was a film made about nuclear war. It was censored by the UK government. People should not see this. It will frighten them. Are people adults or are they children? Do we treat people as grown-ups or not? And I think this is a really good thing. I'm very much in favor of this. Influencing the voters. Look, this is quite interesting. You can find this on YouTube. If you put a tape square on the floor and you have a cat, not always, but in many situations, the cat will go and will sit in that square. And it's astonishing when you see it. The cat will look, and first of all it will paw, and then it will go and sit in there, and then it sits and looks around and feels secure. And do we feel secure? Noam Chomsky, who has written so many books, and I tried to read one, and my God, they are difficult to read. But nevertheless, he said, government allows you within a well-circumscribed area to argue as violently as you wish. But that area is well circumscribed. Is it true or is it not? Are we cats? And are we ants? I could show you a little film of ants being trapped in a circle drawn on a piece of paper. It's amazing. The ant will not cross. There is a limit. That's as far as I will go. I will go no further. I will think no further. I will not think outside of the box. Influencing the voters. 80% of UK newspapers are owned by 5 billionaires. Actually, they're 4 billionaires because these two are twins, identical. This is the amount of money. So it's only 4 people. They're clones. They're like the strawberries that Anna was eating coming in. They're clones, 2 strawberries. Rupert Murdoch, Australian. He owns half of the newspapers in the UK. He lives in the US. $16 billion. Are these the men and women in the street that we meet? Are these the voters? No, this guy doesn't vote. The Barclay twins, well, at least they're English. 9 billion. Richard Desmond, 3 billion. Jonathan Harmsworth, a mere 1.3. He's got to put a 0.3 on to show how much he's got. Hence the fear of the internet. Let us control the internet. The people can speak through the internet. Does it matter? Yes, it matters. It matters a lot. We trust our politicians. We vote for them. They tell us all sorts of nice things. They put a lot of effort into TV programs, radio, going around, shaking hands, knocking doors, kissing babies, kissing your hand sometimes. Do we trust them? Do we trust our politicians? Charlie Hebdo, remember this? Shooting, tragedy. 1.3 million people on the streets of Paris protesting about this shooting. And of course, lots of heads of state were there. You know, Merkel, Francois, Israel, the European Union, various people, Hamas. They were there. And you think, yes, they were there as well. If you lift the camera up a little bit higher, that's what you see. They were not there. But they wanted you to think that they were there. Now, for me, that is utter deception. And therefore, everything I look at now, I say, is it true or is it not true? There's a story about King George VI. This is 50 years ago. He suffered from cancer, age of 52 or so, and he was dying. And so the government put out a message in the evening: the king's life is slowly drawing to a close. It was not. He was already dead. It was announced the next morning, the king has died. Why did they do that? Because they considered that it would not be appropriately royal for your death, the death of the king, to be announced in an evening newspaper. No internet in those days. So they told the people the next day he died. But he had died. Why was that necessary? Are we children? So that's what it was. Does it matter? It matters. Lobbying the elected US government. It's become a multi-billion-dollar business. Lobbyists and attorneys to push their agenda and shape policy making. The National Rifle Association. What a glorious organization it is. The National Rifle Association spent $54 million, and as they say, to secure Republican control of the White House and Congress. Not the voters. Yes, they're made of voters, but not the individual voters, but an organization that lobbies. They were not even in the top 50 of those who fund the lobbying for the UK government. The top 50 organizations spent $700 million on lobbying, and that was 1/4 of the total. $3 billion was spent on lobbying in 2016 to influence the outcome. That's without the Russians. Excuse us if there's Russians in. To influence the outcome of the Democratic presidential election. Does it matter? It matters. So once elected, do our politicians listen to us? You get the feeling that you cast your vote and that's it. We've got their votes to hell. I was visiting my daughter in San Francisco this March. There'd been this shooting in the school. Horrific thing. And it continues. There was a march all over the US and around the world, in fact. And I joined in with my daughter. And in fact, you can see me. I'm just about there. Right? I'm the one with the T-shirt on. I took this photo. I didn't take this one. I thought this was it, you know, children crying and guns. Did the government of the US listen? Well, these are the deaths by guns per year in the United States, 2012 to 2016. In 2016, there were 38,658 deaths by guns in the United States of America. 38,658. Is that astonishing? When Trump says someone was stabbed in Paris, don't go to Paris. This is just ridiculous. Now, of course, Trump says thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. What does he do? He goes to the NRA, the National Rifle Association, and he gives a speech. And he says, "Your gun rights are safe with me." Is that what people voted for? Did they vote for 38,658 people to be killed by guns? I don't think so. Is there a fair distribution of representatives? This is quite funny, I think. This is the 3rd Maryland Congressional District. The people who vote for one particular congressperson are within that green area. It's a bit of a strange area, that. This is what's known as gerrymandering. You shape the area according to the people who live there. And the Democrats and the Republicans say, well, there's a lot of people in that area who vote Democrat. Let's block them all together, and that's the district. Now, is this fair? I don't think so. It's called packing, by the way, and it happens in other countries as well. Was the US election democratic? I've already told you that I don't think it was. Trump and Clinton. Trump lost the popular vote, 62, 63 million, 65, 66 million. So one person, one vote, he lost. But because of things like this, he won. He's the president, according to their rules. This is what it is when you bring this up, speak to the hand. I don't want to know about this. Voters crossed over borders, and there were 3 million people who voted illegally, etc. Brexit. What a lovely thing. David Cameron, we will have a referendum on Europe, and I will stay in order to negotiate it, if, but it won't happen, Britain should choose to leave. Should you believe what you are told? Now, in 2015, the UK Minister for Europe said, the legislation is only about holding a vote. Don't worry. The referendum is advisory. No need to worry. Like the Scottish independence vote, in neither cases was there a need for a threshold, because Parliament will decide. It didn't happen that way. Thomas Jefferson, 3rd President of the United States. A democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49. Total nonsense. It's not true at all. 51% can vote to shoot the other 49% is what people say. Not true at all. It would never happen. Here's a phrase for Johan. Cast not a clout until May is out, and it's still 2 days to go. Don't take off your winter woolies, He who sups with the devil must use a long spoon. And that's what the electorate must think. Sadly, that's what they must think. It continues. The government does not have to implement this. It does not have to set a time limit. It's known as pre-legislative. The electorate voices an opinion. It influences the government in its decisions. Total nonsense. As soon as the vote took place, then it was Brexit, hard Brexit. We've got to leave Europe, leave it all behind. The people have spoken. It was nonsense. If it had happened on a different day, like the weather goes up and down, it would have been different. Does it matter? It matters. Leave, remain. There was 2 million difference, not 1.5 million difference. Didn't vote. And then there are these here, like me, who didn't have a vote. 51.9% said leave, and 48.1% said stay. The people have spoken. Cameron, of course, who had said, I will stay and negotiate it. 7 o'clock in the morning, he said, that's it. I am leaving. And here's his wife saying, come on, you've had your day, let's go. Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the UK now, she was in favour of staying. I'm in. He said, I'm staying, but now I'm going. She said, I'm in, but now I'm out. Can you believe what you are told? You have to be very careful. So, conclusions of someone who can't vote. And I like this. Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities, Paris and London, written now 160 years ago. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And I feel that this is my conclusion. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And if you read this, rather poetic, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. There's a lot of wisdom in what is said there. We have it good. And at the same time, things are happening which we should be careful about. And that's why this particular day is so important. And I think it's so good that you've chosen to run this. It's the right time to talk about democracy and are there dangers to democracy. And I really thank you very much for listening to me and giving me the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Colin. I know you're in a hurry, leaving for a flight, but just some questions about what you were talking. Why do you think we have this discussion right now, at this time? What has happened during the last, 10, 20 years? Why do we have it now, just now?
Well, I mean, I think that we have it now for one, it's Sweden. Sweden is a country where I find that there is, well, first of all, there are 7 political parties in Sweden. In the UK and in the US, there are 2. So it's either this side or it's that side. What I see about Sweden is with the 7 parties, change can be gradual. It's not flipping from one side to the other. And Sweden is a country whereby with ESS I saw it, you will invite people from different walks of life to spend a day in Malmö where they will fill in yellow stickies and they'll say, what about the ESS? Do we like it? Do we not like it? What do we want? What do we not want? And they'll go away without really any decisions having been made. But what has happened is, that's my alarm clock. So they will discuss these things and come to a decision which is not the people have spoken. It is more that it's an evolving situation. And I see a meeting like this as being completely natural in Sweden.
But when it comes to the big movements, we talk about the mega trends, about globalization, digitalization, urbanization, and in what way do they affect the discussion, do you believe?
Well, they affect it enormously. They affect the way that people who have got a lot of influence actually react. But I think that more than anything, one of the reasons for this day is when you look at the situation which is evolving around the world. Europe is such a proud step forward. 50 years, no war in Europe, and this has helped to maintain peace. And I see that these things like globalization, digital media, everyone's personality on their phones, all of that kind of thing. Yes, that's very important. But I think that it's more the fear. What is happening in Poland? What is happening in Hungary? Could we be in what's happening in Spain? Anyone who saw the way that the Catalonian referendum was handled by the Spanish police would be horrified. You're moving towards fascism when you see those kind of things. And for me, that's why I think this day is so important.
But all these stories from Europe, has it to do in some way about Europe that we take peace for granted. That's one thing, but also being in top of the world. Well, we used to be on top of everything and being the leader, and now we see everything's developing all over the world, and we can't really handle it. Is that a key problem with the Western world?
Well, I think on an individual level, certainly you think it used to be, the sun used to shine more in those days. The grass was much greener. You walked out of your door and everyone threw flowers at you and things like this. We were also healthy in those days. People tend to look back and say it was much better. When things become a little bit tricky, people look back, I do, and say, yes, those were the glory days. And we want to return to the glory days, and I see that increasing in a way.
But you could recently read about in Sweden we have in the belief in the future. That's important, but you have different percentages in bigger cities than on the land side. So how important is belief in the future for defending democracy?
We'd have no children. If there was no belief in the future, we'd have no children. And there clearly is a belief in the future. Clearly, we see our quality of life is extremely high, particularly here. Our wealth is particularly high. We see an increasing diversity. But also what we see here in Sweden is an investment we're in Lund, for God's sake. We see an investment in the next generation. We see a well-educated society. We are not seeking to keep people away from education in this country, and I say we. And I think that that's extremely important. And so that is the future. We are not the future. I'm sorry to say this. I'm not the youngest person in the room. The young people are the future, and they are being invested in.
So, a final question. If you, we have the election in September.
I can't vote.
No, I know. I wasn't. You can't vote. No. If you could wish for some things.
Yes.
What would you wish for about Swedish democracy and the election? What would you see? We have a couple of months. What would be the best from your angle to happen? Not about what parties, about how we handle democracy and the elections.
Keep going. Keep going.
And what do you mean by that?
Look at Sweden on the many, many international indexes. The index of innovation, Sweden or Finland is top. The gender equality for Sweden is very close to the top. The spread of the internet, Sweden is very close to the top. You look at all indexes and you will see that the eating of chocolate.
Switzerland.
Yes, but Sweden is very near the top.
Thank you.
And actually, if you plot chocolate, the amount of chocolate that people eat, compared to the number of Nobel Prizes that are won, there's a direct correlation. If you don't eat chocolate, you don't win Nobel Prizes.
So what you're saying, we have we don't talk about our society and the future in the right way. We problemize it too much. We paint it in dark colors.
When we have our own problems, and we all do have our own problems, we can say, "Oh my God, it's not the way it used to be." However, what I would say to your very deep question, what should happen in Sweden? In my view, it is keep going. Set an example. The ESS for me was so important to be placed outside the big three countries in Europe. It should be somewhere else. And I came here and thought, this is the way. We can build this in a way which is better than has been done before. We can be energy sustainable. We can show the way. It's not like the Wallander novels. It's not fog and chairs appearing out of the mist, and it's not that. Sweden is a place that when people come, they say, wow, the people are so friendly. The food is edible. There are no polar bears in the street. It's amazing. It's a great place. And that was one of my motivations. I thought, right, let's do our best to get it built here. You got to forgive me.
Thank you so much,
Ha det bra.
Dr. Colin Carlile.
Thank you.
Here's some flowers to you.